Welcome to Windows on the World. This is a short show which is a follow-up to a couple of recent shows we did. One was called Momentum and Labour Zionism, and that was about who's pulling the strings in the Labour Party. It's very, very interesting, and it's on windowsontheworld.net and YouTube. That's Momentum and Labour Zionism. It goes into this so-called anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, which was never really proven, and of course started out when Ken Livingstone actually put into the public domain a historical event, and of course that was anti-Semitic, the Havara Agreement. And then it escalated, and an Israeli agent, Ruth Smith, got involved, who was a lobbyist for BICOM, and also, interestingly, Hope Not Hate, which is covered in the second show there. Hope Not Hate and Israel's Lobbyists, that's it. It's called Hope Not Hate and Israel's Lobbyists on windowsontheworld.net and YouTube. This week we're going to go into this new definition of anti-Semitism and what we can do about it as it appears to put a certain group above the law. And with the revelations recently, what's happening with this Israeli agent being unmasked, I mean, it's getting beyond ridiculous. So this power and influence of the Israel lobby on the British government is now clearer than ever. It's a known fact, and it's in the public domain. Now, this show is going to pose some legal arguments to the attempted shutdown by Israel's lobbyists and agents on reporting and free speech. This also includes the introduction by Theresa May of the adoption of this internationally agreed definition of anti-Semitism. Now, it was reported some time ago that Theresa May will exploit deep Labour divisions on anti-Semitism by unveiling a tough new legal definition of the prejudice. Now, we've got to remember about Theresa May. It's her first appointment before she was made Prime Minister was to see the chief rabbi. And we know where her loyalties lie and who's bought and paid for a lot of these MPs, Labour and Conservative Friends of Israel. We have to look at all these lobbying groups now, especially with this Jewish agent Shai Masot being exposed and the underhand tactics that are being used against people who speak out against Israel and, of course, in favour of Palestine. So this goes on here. This was when it was reported about this new legal definition of anti-Semitism. As well as meaning the hatred of Jews, the phrase should also apply to anyone who blames them for the world's problems or say the state of Israel has no right to exist, the Prime Minister will say. She reveals that Britain is formally adopting the more stringent definition as drawn up by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. The new definition will put pressure on Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn to match the Prime Minister's support of it. A bitter critic of Israel for years, the opposition leader also infuriated the Jewish community for presiding over a whitewash inquiry into anti-Semitism alongside left-wingers in the party. Now, that's absolutely untrue, because it wasn't a whitewash. The whitewash was the actual use of the word anti-Semitism to cause controversy. There was no whitewash there at all. There was no anti-Semitism. It was all created. And if you have a look at those two shows, you will find that the narrative is being controlled even by those who own Momentum. So that's very, very important. So let's just go into this. Pinning down exactly what anti-Semitism means will help police and the courts punish people who carry out hate crime against Jewish people, the Prime Minister will insist. Well, of course, we know it's not about hate crime about Jewish people. It's about people actually saying what is true about Israel and its lobbyists, its agents, its overwhelming control of the British government. So she's basically spinning a yarn there. It's not about hatred, it's about exposing the truth and the true influence of what's going on in this country with bought out people like her who are just merely puppets for Israeli lobbyists. And that goes for David Cameron before her, and of course look into the Labour Friends of Israel, the Conservative Friends of Israel, BICOM, this agent Ruth Smith, who was also involved in Hope Not Hate and BICOM, who created this controversy and threw her toys out of the pram when journalist Mark Wadsworth stated that people in the room after this anti-Semitism inquiry were working hand in hand with the right-wing media. She took offence at this, thought it was all about herself, but she's an agent, she's being paid. She was funded by Poju Zabludovic, the billionaire who is from a family of Israeli arms dealers, who funded also David Cameron and many other people, and he also owns 40% of downtown Las Vegas, I think, so he's got a few quid. It said, speaking in London, Mrs May will say anti-Semitism should have no place in politics and no place in this country. What she means by that, of course, is that that Zionism and Jews will be above the law. And it says, I am proud to lead a party that takes the firmest stand against it. A bit of propaganda there, that was from The Sun. Now, if we go into this recent revelation, it really puts all this nonsense into perspective, with this Israeli agent being filmed by an undercover Al Jazeera reporter. So the power and influence of the Israeli lobby on the British government is now clearer than ever and a known fact in the public domain. Now, we're going to pose some legal arguments to the attempted shutdown by Israel's lobbyists and agents on reporting and free speech. Now, this also includes the introduction of this Theresa May adoption of the internationally agreed definition of anti-Semitism. So, with the recent events, an undercover report on Israeli agent Shai Massot, it's just shown how compromised the UK government is by Israel's lobbyists and its agents. Now, within this article on Windows on the World called Lawful Response to Israel's Propaganda Agents, you will find lots of links which take you into a spider's web of subversion which is going on in every level of society and in every organisation in the country by these Jewish Israeli agents. So we know that Theresa May is especially under the influence to the degree she's introduced this internationally agreed definition of anti-Semitism, which you can find linked to the article, or you can find it on the internet. It contains sections which can be used to shut down free and fair speech, and there's never been a time when we need it more than now with what's going on with the Israel lobby. So this bias is an outrageous betrayal of the many in the country who are against the actions and its overbearing influence of Israel and its lobbyists, whose first interest is clearly not to the host country or the majority of its population. So the anti-Semitism campaign orchestrated against Jeremy Corbyn had no merit, and we can say that with some certainty now. And it was without substance. It was a deliberate attack against the elected leader. And we now know that Israeli agents want Corbyn out. This was always clear, but it's never been more clearer than now. So this is really a hidden hand that's operating both parties in this country. So political interference, including that of Israeli arms dealer Poju Zabludovic, it's well documented. Those links are all in that article. So, political interference in the democratic process is clear, but the influence of the lobbyists and their organisations are controlling the narrative in every way possible. So these include BICOM, British Israeli Communications, and the Community Security Trust, who are feeding information to the papers about so-called anti-Semitism. Now, we really need to know the sources of this and how they're collating the information, because this is an independent group, which is a self-interest group. They have an interest in promoting anti-Semitism. That's their job, or so-called anti-Semitism. People have tried to go out and find anti-Semitism in the streets, including a reporter for the Daily Mail, and he congratulated London on not being anti-Semitic. It's quite comical, because he put his yarmulke on and he walked around and he was trying to find someone who didn't like him, and nobody gave a damn, which most of us would know would be the case, especially in London. No one's going to bat an eyelid, are they? So this implementation of a definition of anti-Semitism by this big friend of Israel, Theresa May, it's an attack on democracy. And the reason for that is that this attempts to shut down legitimate analysis of disproportionate Zionist and Jewish power and influence, including shutting down historical analysis of the Holocaust. Now, we should really be able to be talking about this now, but they're shutting it down. It's already illegal in many countries. Now, the reason it's illegal is because of revisionist historians who've basically looked into this event and analysed it correctly. So if you correctly analyse this event, then you're anti-Semitic and Holocaust denier. And things can get quite hysterical after that. So the statements of fact below, which I've written in this article, which you can see there, they rebut the assumptions made in this newly adopted definition of anti-Semitism, an attack on democratic speech. Now, I've written this in what's called the negative averment, which means that the negative has to be proved. So it means that if you accuse someone of doing something, they have to prove they didn't do it. And because this broad definition of anti-Semitism is so broad, it's reversed back on the perpetrators. So we're asking them to prove what they will find impossible to prove. So here it is, point for point. It starts off as notice to UK government and Theresa May Prime Minister. As the golden rule of law states that everyone is equal under the law and no one is above it, the following statements of fact need to be rebutted point for point, and no blanket dismissal of the following facts can be accepted. 1. There is no evidence that some of the highest public servants in office have not betrayed the national interests of those who dwell on the Isles of Britain, and it is believed that none exists. 2. There is no evidence that the British government is not being unduly influenced and steered by lobbyists and agents of Israel, and it is believed that none exists. 3. There is no evidence that Prime Minister Theresa May, by removing free speech regarding any justified criticism of Israel, its agents and lobbyists, is not working against the golden rule of law, and it is believed that none exists. That's especially important with what's just happened, with this Jewish agent being exposed and a whole network of them actually through different sources which you can find linked into the article. So number 4 is there is no evidence that replacing existing laws with laws upholding specific bias towards one group and a country in a host country is not unconstitutional and against the majority interest. 4. There is no evidence that replacing existing laws with laws upholding specific bias towards one group and country in a host country is not unconstitutional and against the majority interest of the host country, and it is believed that none exists. So let's go into these quotes. The quotes here are excerpts from this new definition of anti-Semitism. Quote, denying the fact, scope, mechanisms, e.g. gas chambers, or intentionality of the genocide of the Jewish people at the hands of National Socialist Germany and its supporters and accomplices during World War II, the Holocaust. Okay, so as known facts have been kept out of the public domain by controlled media outlets and hearsay has been presented as fact, the questioning of the event known as the Holocaust cannot be placed above the golden rule of law. So let's go into point 5 now. There is no evidence that propaganda stated as fact is not against the public interest, and it is believed that none exists. 6. There is no evidence that state interference in banning, questioning an historical event such as that known as the Holocaust is not favouring a political narrative, and it is believed that none exists. 7. There is no evidence that some publicised Holocaust survivors have not obfuscated and fabricated stories for political and financial gain, and it is believed that none exists. 8. There is no evidence that the known investigations by experts into the Holocaust which dispute the publicised narrative are not accurate, forensic and true, and it is believed that none exists. Let's get a quote now from this definition of anti-Semitism once again. Quote, accusing Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel or to the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than to the interests of their own nations. Well, we've just seen examples of that recently, and of course this Shai Masot is the biggest example of that, although there's plenty more. If you go into the article, you'll find that there's a lot of reporters who've gone into the BDS movement and they've found subversion happening all over the place in universities. It goes through every level of society. 9. There is no evidence that Jewish and Israeli agents do not have disproportionate control of media and political parties in the UK, and it is believed that none exists. There is no evidence that certain Jewish citizens in UK government positions are not Israeli agents and do not have an interest in the promotion of the State of Israel and Jewish power over the sovereign interests of the UK, and it is believed that none exists. Now, these comments now are particularly important. So there's many more links in that article, and there's many videos in there as well, including ours on Momentum and Labour Zionism and Hope Not Hate and Israel's lobbyists. So all this now pales into insignificance with the behind the scenes lobbying, when we've got in your face agents actually stating that they can subvert what's happening in British politics and in this country. So this country's been subjugated to the interests of a foreign power by our own government, or people within our own government. That article is called Lawful Response to Israel's Propaganda Agents, and it's on windowsontheworld.net. We've got some very interesting interviews coming up. We're now getting back into Windows on the World after a short break, and keep checking the site. There's more stuff up there all the time, and we'll see you soon.